What's up, world? Isaiah here from Making It Make Sense with Isaiah, Jasper, and Theo. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify with new episodes every Friday. We also want to hear from you between episodes, so follow our Instagram at Making It Make Sense IJT or email us at makingitmakesense@gmail.com. Now listen up and let's make all the sense.
Hey, welcome back to Making It Make Sense with Isaiah, Jasper, and Theo.
Hello, guys.
Hello, America. We're going to be talking about addiction tonight. We're going to be having a discussion about it. So I hope you guys enjoy.
Oh, yeah.
And before we start, we want to give you some information just in case you're dealing with some addiction or you know someone that's dealing with an addiction.
Absolutely.
What?
So from you can reach the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration at 1-800-662-HELP. Help is going to be 4357. Again, that's 1-800-662-HELP. They are free, confidential, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 365-day-a-year treatment referrals and information services for individuals and families facing mental and or substance abuse disorders. So please reach out to them if you or someone else you know is suffering and needs additional help.
Let's get it. Let's get started. So Isaiah, let's start with you. You gonna start it off for us tonight? You want to start it off, or do we want to just
I
do
mean,
random?
you know what? Because I just talked y'all little heads off when we was just privately talking. So, like,
Uh,
so Jasper, please, or Theo, if you guys,
so
would like
let's
to
let
lead
the
this off.
folks know the reason that we are speaking about this is because recently the actor Michael K. Williams passed away of possible overdose.
Yes.
And Michael K. Williams, who, for me, I don't know him from The Wire because I've never seen The Wire.
Yes.
I know him from like different movies, and the last thing I know him from was from Lovecraft Country,
Mm-hmm.
which I think was the best that he did. And I didn't even know that he suffered from substance issues. So
Mm-hmm.
this was all like surprising to me. I thought like, oh my God, somebody killed him, or somebody broke into his apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And it was this, but I looked up some information and it said like 7,000 people died from drug overdose in the year 2019. They
Yeah.
still haven't come up with the data for 2020, so that was the year of COVID. So you can imagine.
Yeah, I'm afraid for that number. Honestly, just because, this year, I swear I always say this year because, I think you guys can agree it feels like 2020 and 2021 just kind of ran together. But, um, the amount of people, especially at the beginning of, the onset of the pandemic, when a lot of people or everyone really was, some level of quarantined and didn't have the same level of access, physically in a lot of ways, even, to get help or to, reach out and share with someone that, they were suffering from addiction. Um, it was very, I think, in the way that, many of us, felt very isolated and closed off. I think that, went dually for people suffering from addiction and people that, you know, felt then at that time that they didn't have the same level of support because, maybe in your particular situation, you had to, suffer alone because you lived alone. So you lived alone, but then you lived alone with the demons that you were suffering from,
Mm.
with addiction. So, it's always easier to, I guess from my opinion, my thought process, it's always easier when you're suffering like that to not have to suffer alone, to be able to have support and someone to lean on. you know.
And during this pandemic, whatever demons you were dealing with,
Mm-hmm.
they seem to have come out like at full force
Oh
during the
my god.
pandemic. Like
Yeah.
if you were in an abusive relationship, it became even more abusive. If you had substance issues, you indulged more in your substances. So like it magnified everything. If you were a child that was experiencing child abuse, it magnified that even more. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, some folks maybe did not come out of this pandemic or this quarantine time being their best selves.
Mm-hmm.
And now they have to go back into the real world and or back into the world of socializing like quote unquote normal with all this new added trauma
Mm-hmm.
that before there was a relief, but you know, we were quarantined and I fortunately don't suffer from any substance use or any severe mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
But I can imagine those that did. And I have the luxury of coming out of quarantine, hopefully a better Theo. And
Mm-hmm.
substances are not for me. I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I live a very sober lifestyle. But
Mm-hmm.
that's also because I know there are a lot of addicts in my side of the family,
Mm-hmm.
my dad's side of the family. So I make sure that I stay away from drugs and alcohol because I don't know what any of those things might trigger inside my DNA
Mm-hmm.
or in my mental health. So I'm very clean in that way. So I I don't even like the taste of alcohol. I think alcohol is just a bleh, which is a very odd thing to say because a lot of folks don't think that way. But I really, and I always, I thank Black Jesus that that isn't my struggle, but I also ask Black Jesus to look after those people that is their struggle.
Yeah.
And addiction and mental health, those are not things that anybody chooses. Addiction is a disease. Mental health issues is something that you just can't help.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's true. And it's sad, seeing people who try best to overcome those demons, and they don't, the demons eventually overtake them, and then you see them succumb to that. It's sad and heartbreaking, because people fight every day to try and stay sober, to try to get clean, to try to clean up their lives. They try to get rid of those demons. And it's not easy, because when you're battling addiction, some people have 30 years, 40 years of an addiction, and you can't
Mm-hmm.
overcome 40-year addiction overnight. And so it's hard to really break that cycle of it, especially when if it's in a family cycle where it's histories of addiction, and then the cycle's not broken and it's continuous. It's a tragic disease. And it's hitting the black community. Like our community is like heavily affected by it, because it's in those low income areas. It's hitting those poverty stricken people,
Mm-hmm.
even in people with money too. Because they can afford the access to get quantities of drugs to intake. And
Mm,
now that this epidemic of the opioids and
fentanyl.
Fentanyl. Mm-hmm.
fentanyl. Like, that's becoming an epidemic, because now they're being ingested, they're being put in drugs, and
Mm-hmm.
because there was a comedian who died from a drug overdose as well, and he ingested some drugs that were laced with that particular drug. And it's scary, because these dealers are these people, and they're not being they don't care. And so they're giving them
Mm-hmm.
drugs. They think that they are getting the drug of their choice, but they're getting drugs that are being tampered with. So and then that becomes an addiction, because now you're addicted to multiple drugs. Now you're hooked on not just one, you're hooked on two or three drugs all at the same time. So it's a disease just is spiraling. It's constantly just destroying our community, and it specifically,
And you know, 72% opioids are a factor in 7 overdose death and here in America. So that's like 72%.
Yeah.
yeah, it's not surprising. It's fortunately, like, it's become this popular thing. Like, over these last couple of years, it just become this thing of drug of choice that everyone's doing. They going in and they want that high, they want that adrenaline rush from it. So it's
Hmm.
become this addictive thing that is now
But
mainstream. It's becoming
but I
mainstream.
but I really love and I also hate the way that things are being dealt with. And I wish that the same kind of grace and the same kind of understanding was paid to the folks in the 80s and early 90s
Hmm.
when there was the crack epidemic.
Yes, absolutely.
This same information existed back then,
Hmm.
but instead of showing them grace and understanding that this is an addiction, that this is a disease, these people are not criminals, they have an ailment, let's give them therapy, let's give them drug counseling, so on and so forth. They criminalize these folks and
Hmm.
therefore had a ripple effect of a generation of people that grew up without mothers and fathers and stable families. Instead,
Hmm.
they were put into a broken system, and you have adults that had to fight with a broken system that are some are broken and still dealing with that trauma.
Hmm.
Today, in the opioid epidemic, they have therapy. Let's give them counseling. Let's
Hmm.
take them to drug treatment facilities, and they're viewing them from the lens of they're addicts, they have a disease. Let's treat the disease with love and compassion and empathy and a whole lot of grace.
Hmm.
Because it wasn't the thing before. And hopefully
Absolutely.
they continue to do this. Because addiction is not anyone's fault.
Absolutely. And that's, I
It's
think,
not.
the other thing is, you know, it did come from this, even, even just in within communities, it was always, and I've even, I mean, unfortunately, um, I heard someone say this about 2 years ago now. Like, and it was crazy for me because I'm like, in present day, you're saying this? Like, oh, well, that's no one's fault but theirs. And I remember thinking, like, first of all, I no longer wish to engage in conversation with this person, but also I thought to myself, why is it their fault? Why is this addiction, this demon that they're battling, why is this their fault? Obviously, this is something that's bigger than them and they need help. They don't need your judgment about it. They need rehabilitation.
Hmm.
They don't need to
Yeah.
be there. They already are, have been or are going to be literally criminalized for this. They don't need to be criminalized socially by you as well. So it's just kind of, there's a shift that's happened, but we got a little ways to go. We have more improvements to make, but there definitely is a lot more happening now, in a positive direction in the way that we're viewing it as a society and the way that we're tackling those issues now versus, the way people used to talk about it, and little pockets of people that still do view it that way,
And they need
unfortunately.
to stay away those little pockets.
Absolutely. They need to just be that and be eradicated. But anyway, uh,
Can you imagine being an addict and going to a friend and that person is your friend?
mhm,
Like an addict, someone who's is an addict or has the disease of addiction does not need to be reminded or needs to be chastised. From my
mhm.
understanding, folks who are addicts know that they're addicts, and if
Oh,
they
yeah.
could control this disease, just like someone who has cancer, they're aware they have cancer, and if they could not have cancer, they will not have cancer. So if
Mhm,
someone did not want to, be an alcoholic or be addicted to opioids or crack cocaine or whatever the drug is,
mhm.
they themselves, I don't think anyone wants to be in that condition.
Yeah.
So we should always once again, I learned show grace, be
Mhm.
supportive, and all the proactive ways to be supportive to a person who has an addiction. And when you are unable and do not know what the proper words are, redirect them to someone or something that could. But
Mhm.
please don't come with that. Can you imagine? It's your fault that you relapsed. Oh my God.
I'd be like, and it's your fault. I'm about to put my shoe up your behind, but we could talk. Like, like what? That's crazy.
And I even with Michael K. Williams, I imagine this man was talented, was famous. Can you imagine what drove him? Because I saw an interview about him, and I've read a lot about addiction, and I've had experiences with people who are addicts. That before you take the substance that makes you an addict, before you drink the alcohol, before you take the heroin, before you take the crack,
Mhm.
before you take the opioid, you relapse way before then.
Mhm.
Relapsing is a process that is that leads to then the substance use that helps support everything that you're going through.
Mhm.
And can you imagine being this person and what drives you to such a dark place? Because he was like a light,
Yeah.
from what I'm hearing from people. He was a light for me in all the shows and all the movies that I've seen him in.
You know he was in Boardwalk Empire too. That's
Yes,
what
he
I kept
was.
thinking. I was racking my brain over that. I've also I'm gonna say this too. I think that, and maybe this also goes in line too with this kind of this kind of like and I think it's people are seeing beyond it a little bit more now, obviously, but this kind of like, oh, I'm fine culture, or I'm okay. Like, I'm good. How are you? I'm good. How are you? No, I'm actually not good. And there's like all these things behind it, right? So it's that kind of idea of like someone is they have this kindness in them and this light about them that is just infectious to everyone else, right? And it's just full of positivity, but then inside it's a testament to like you really don't know what's going on like inside people's hearts and minds, and what they're going through privately and what they're battling alone. And because that's the other tough thing is, I feel like that even if you have somebody walking along the way with you, sometimes the inside it feels like you're alone, with anything that you're going through sometimes. And I think that's I think what hits people really deeply too is knowing that someone was so positive and they were so gracious and so kind, and they were this like beacon of light, and then to see something like that happen to a person like that,
This
it
darkness.
it's right, it because they were overcome, by that darkness, by that demon they were fighting. It's just really devastating because you're like, wow, how come that person had to be going through that alone, but they made it a point every day to make everyone else feel so good, you
And
know?
you know
It's
what?
sad. It is sad because you, like you said, that's the thing for me. So is with addiction is the relapsing because
Mhm.
like Michael K. Williams, he had a drug addiction for years, and like nobody really knew he was struggling with this addiction.
I didn't.
Neither did
Him, and then we lost DMX. Before him, we lost DMX. He also had an addiction for years.
Yeah.
He went into rehab. He relapsed, and then we
I.
lost
Yeah.
uh Frankie Lyons, who was Keisha Cole's mother. She had an addiction for years.
Oh, right,
She
right.
went to rehab. She relapsed and died on her actual birthday. So these relapses are
On
the
whose
most shocking
birthday?
thing because when they do get themselves clean and get together, even for like months or even a year, and
Mm-hmm.
they start working and progressing in their rehabilitation, it only takes one time for them
Mm-hmm.
to relapse, for it to kill them, because their bodies have cleaned off of the drugs. And so when they redo a drug they've not done in so long, it's in a shock to their bodies, and it kills them instantly. So it's sad that people who who try hard to fight this addiction, and they get around the wrong crowd, and they get temptation. Temptation is strong, and just
Mm.
seeing the drug or even smelling the drug, the will they have or had to not do it is overtaken by that temptation and that opportunity to, oh, I can take it one, I can hit it one more time, or I can sniff it one more time. It's not going to hurt, but it does because it ends up killing them. So it's
Mm.
that's the sad part about it, because they all have families, they all have children, they all,
Jasper, who
Mhm.
you
died
know,
on their birthday?
huh?
Frankie died on her birthday
On her
or her daughter's
61st
birthday?
birthday, or yeah, 61st birthday, she died on her 61st birthday, which
Oh
is,
God.
Shut up.
yes. So
Oh
that was supposed to, when they broke and she died, that was the most haunting thing for me, to die the day that you born. Like, that's the most haunting thing, to hear somebody die that they were given
I
life,
know.
and she just turned 61 at a party. She somebody at the party, I would assume, brought the drug or brought it around her, and I was like, where were the people? Where was her kids? Like, where were the people that care for her, that know
Mhm.
she was going through a struggle? Like, why would y'all allow her to be even in the vicinity of drugs
I
when
did
you
not
know it's
know
something that she's
that.
going through?
Neither
That
did I.
she's going through, and that's what frustrates me, because in all these scenarios we see, like, somebody's bringing them the drugs, somebody is going to get it for them. They're not just going themselves. They're sending people because
Mhm.
they have money, so they're sending people coming around them, and people that should be their love them, that should be guarding them and protecting them,
Mhm.
aren't doing that, and we've seen that, and it's sad.
You
But you
know.
know what
Oh,
you
go ahead.
said, Isaiah, that resonated with me and it brought up a memory.
What's that?
I'm talking about the darkness and sometimes people just being
Mhm.
the light, but they get consumed by the
Mhm.
darkness that is addiction. I had
Mhm.
an uncle, his name is Uncle Papo.
Mhm.
He was the funniest mother, you know what? He every time he came around, I used to like these little cube caramel candies that came in a transparent wrapper when I was younger.
Oh my God, I think I know what little candies you're talking about.
And
I do too.
he
Right.
always used to give me those candies.
Mhm.
But later on, I found out, he was here today, gone tomorrow for me
Mhm.
as a child. And I later on found out that my uncle had a very bad heroin addiction.
Wow.
But mind you, he was the life of the party. He can salsa his ass off. Very, very good looking man. Beautiful, nice brown skin,
Mhm.
beautiful white teeth, pure head full of jet black hair. And he was always so funny. And I remember vividly, when he came to my parents' house or my grandparents' house in Panama, and my parents, my mother, side of the family is very like gaudy. So my
Mhm.
grandmother had bought me a Panamanian chain because
Mhm.
Panama is known for having very nice gold. So it
Mhm.
was Panamanian gold chain, and I had a ring, two rings. And I remember my uncle, oh, saying, oh, come here, nephew, whatever, whatever. My uncle took me to the bathroom and took that chain, and took those gold rings, and he stole it from. And
Uh-uh.
yeah,
That's what addicts do. That's what they
Lord.
do.
Oh
and then I
man.
remember my uncle stealing my grandma's television. I
Oh,
remember him
Yes.
going into my grandmother's jewelry box
wow.
That's what they
and
do.
stealing.
Yeah.
And I got in some serious trouble for taking those damn for not taking for losing my jewelry.
I
And everybody
imagine.
and I was like, this motherfucker. But I didn't say anything because it was my uncle and
Right.
he was funny and he will provide me these caramel treats.
Mhm.
And then later on, he passed away of AIDS through his heroin use.
Mhm.
He contracted AIDS, and my uncle just, whatever AIDS it does to you.
Right.
That's what he went through that whole process. And I was like, wow. And as an adult, I processed, my uncle was an addict. That does not mean that my uncle was not the bee's knees. It does
Mhm.
not mean that my uncle was not the shit. It
Mhm.
does not mean that all those experiences that I had with him that were positive were not true.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, my uncle had a disease, and he let this disease consumed him. You know, the disease consumed him, the darkness consumed him.
Mm-hmm.
And like I tell you, there is no man I've ever seen be able to dance salsa like him. But to
Wow.
this day,
Wow. And speaking of your uncle, you know, my on my dad's side, that side
Mm-hmm.
is his siblings were had heavy addictions to a lot of his siblings to drugs, and my father and my uncle, they're my dad's the baby boy, and my uncle is like next to the baby, so they're really, really close, and both of them had addictions to cocaine and were really heavy alcoholics, and my dad was very abusive. Both of them were abusive, but my dad's
Mm-hmm.
very abusive to my mother and very abusive to me and my brother as a child. So we witnessed him when he would get drunk and he would get high, like he would be a completely different person. Like he's like he would turn to like this demonic, like he was like demonic almost. Like he was like another person, and he would be, you know, considered physically abusive to my mom, and he would, you know, tear stuff up in the house, and like he would steal the TVs and steal our furniture and steal jewelry and sell it to get this cocaine because that's what they do. And he, you know, he did it for half my childhood and part of my um uh adolescent age. You know, he was heavily into drugs, and you
Mm-hmm.
know, I mean, it got bad. Like he was in and out. He went to prison multiple times. Like he went to rehab a couple of times. That didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, once he moved to another state. He moved to Kansas, and then moving there kind of helped him because where we live down here in Arkansas, it's people that he knew did drugs. He couldn't get away from it, so he had to move himself
mm,
so he could be away from it. And thankfully, my father, he's been 4 or 5 years now, clean, sober,
That's good.
and from those drugs, he didn't touch the drug in a long time, and I'm thankful for that because you know I didn't think he would even overcome it because it was such a heavy addiction. Like I
Mm-hmm.
seen him actually do it. Like first time I
Mm-hmm.
saw him do it, I was 15. I looked at the window. I looked out the window of my aunt's house and I seen him, my uncle, still on the porch, actually hitting the pipe. And I've never seen him never seen him do it. So when
Oh.
I seen him do it, like seen him actually do it, I was stunned because I'm like, this
Mm-hmm.
got out of control. So, yeah. So him finally now his age now finally at this present time not having an addiction. I'm grateful for, but my uncle is still going through it. He is almost 60,
mm,
and he's
Mm-hmm.
still like going like he 20, 25. Like he's still doing drugs, still doing cocaine. He's still, you know, drinking, and he's still a heavy alcoholic. He's still that same abusive person that he was 20, 30 years ago. He's not slowing down, and it's like not,
Mm-hmm.
and we, you know, you can't change him. You can't make them stop. You know, we talk to him. You know, you can we talk to him and have conversations, share our concerns, but they have to want to stop and have to see that it's a problem. He doesn't see it as that it's a problem. He doesn't. He knows he has an addiction, but he doesn't see it as a problem. He doesn't see that what he's doing is like concerning that he should slow down. He doesn't see that. He's not willing to acknowledge that. So you know, we had to come to a realization that you know all we can do at this point is just you know obviously talk to Black Jesus, sit our prayers to Black Jesus,
yeah.
and let Black
Yeah.
Jesus you know take control of the situation and let him handle him and let him you know whatever he's gonna do for my uncle. But you know, we
Mm-hmm.
realize you can't make somebody change, and it's sad because just watching him constantly do these drugs. And it's like I got told him before. I'm like, uncle, like you're not young anymore. Like your body's only gonna take so much more of this abuse before it completely wipes out on you. Like
Yeah.
you're not realizing that you're not young. Like your body takes more time to bounce back from the
Mm-hmm.
trauma of the abuse of drugs, and you're near 60. Like you need to understand this. Like your body only can handle so much abuse. You've seen
Body's
these
not set
people
up that
that
way.
you've known die from drug overdoses. Like he knows people who died of drug
Mm-hmm.
overdoses in his family and friends. So you know people who've done died, and you still like this careless attitude. Like it could happen to you if you don't stop. And it's just unfortunate because like many people, their battle continues, and people they still go through this. So it's sad knowing
Yeah.
someone you love is still in this battle and is unwilling to right now try to overcome those demons of addiction.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
congratulations to your father, and let's wish
Absolutely.
him many, many more years of sobriety and
Yes,
Many
thank
more.
you,
being
thank you,
present and healthy.
Absolutely.
thank you.
Many, many more years.
And let's hope and wish and pray for that for your uncle.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Yeah, addiction ain't no joke.
at all.
It's really not. I mean, it's, and while I don't have any in my, in my immediate family or extended that I know of, and I say that
Yeah,
I know of because,
Mm-hmm.
again, circling back to, there's a lot of people that suffer in silence.
yeah.
Oh
um
yeah.
and I think, and that's why I always kind of use that as kind of a hey, like, just because I don't know that, experience, and, again, no one that I know of, or like within my family, like, that knows that experience, it doesn't mean that I should show any less compassion and understanding, and empathy for that, because, there are, I have known people that have not made it through, their addiction.
Mhm.
And the thing is, in some cases, you don't realize it until, you'll see this person here and there. Hey, how are, and they're just, again, it's that, when I was speaking about that, just the a person shining like that and being so, just every time you see them, it's like so good to see them. Like, they just make you just beam. Like, it's so, that was from a personal experience with a person that I knew. Um, and that's what I felt every time I would see them. It was just, you would never know, that they were suffering in silence and battling this alone, you know? And so the loss of that was just like, wow, and you ask yourself, wow, like, sometimes you'll turn it around yourself and go, okay, well, I wish I would have known that. But then it's not healthy to think that way also, because
Yeah.
there's nothing you could have done, unfortunately.
Nothing.
There's nothing at
No.
all you could have done. The things you could have done, you would have done had you had the information at the time, but you didn't. And so you can't hold yourself in this space as if you were supposed to. You know what I mean? Because
Mm-hmm.
there's no way. But um my heart just goes out to anyone suffering in silence, and I just really hope that, my wish is that people continue to open up about what they're going through,
Mm-hmm.
and to know that they don't have to sit in it by themselves. And that's anything, that's anything that you are struggling with, whether that be mental health, or mental health. I'm sorry, mental health. Can't speak tonight, or substance abuse. I think that's one of the beautiful things that you mentioned too, Theo, that people are doing more of. People are talking about their mental health. People are talking about substance abuse. People are talking about generational trauma, or traumas that they've experienced, that are not generational necessarily, that are tied to an experience that they had. Um,
And also,
mm,
people need to, let's be mindful
mhm.
about how, when someone is, or how judgy we might and come off.
Yeah.
Because I've seen people, and I am guilty of this as well. I
It's
am
like
guilty
mind
of this
your
as well.
it's like
As
mind your verbiage. Like,
Yeah, and I someone told me that I've been guilty of that. And once again, I've grown from that.
mhm,
I didn't know better. Now that I know better, I do better, and I make amends for that not knowing. So
mhm,
I'll go, oh, you do heroin? I have an issue with heroin. Ugh,
mhm,
heroin. Oh, I like I'm an alcoholic. I have an issue with ugh, alcohol.
mhm.
Ugh, and that can sometimes cause a ripple effect, and someone who's an addict's life,
Oh, true,
and it could cause more
Oh yeah.
harm than good.
Oh yeah,
true.
definitely. I definitely agree with that. Like
Mhm,
it's all about, like you said, the verbiage and how you and what you say when you're around them, if you become a knowledge of that. Because I had to learn that, because I would say like
mhm,
have the same reaction and not realizing, yeah, that could send them even more spiraling, because they already know what they're doing is bad. They know what they're doing
true.
is disgusting. So for me to say it
Like,
and
internalizes it
put it out
almost.
there as that, it's
Mhm,
like, okay, I'm really now I'm making it worse, because now they're gonna
Yeah.
really go deeper in it. Like, okay,
mhm,
I know it's disgusting. Now my nephew, son, or whatever is saying it to me, it's disgusting. So now I'm really going to get deep in it. So yeah,
mhm,
that is a thing that I think everyone needs to, not just us but everyone, who has people who are they deal with who are dealing with addiction has to be mindful of, because what you say can be more detrimental to the person going through
Absolutely.
the addiction.
Absolutely. I think it's just, like, and like, just like these kind of like realizations, where like it hits us like, wait a minute, like we can choose, not to sound like Pollyanna here, but like I think people forget like you can you don't have to wake up and choose violence with your words. You can wake up
True.
and right? Like you can wake up and for real, like you can wake up and be kind because you don't know what somebody's battling silently. You have no idea what happened before you met them on that page in that chapter in that book of their life. You just happen to walk in on that part. And that's why you should never walk in on somebody's chapter and judge them for what you see because you don't know what happened 1 through 8 or so on. You know what I
That's
mean?
true.
So it's just important to try to like make the effort to see people as not just one dimensional and one note, even if it's a stranger, because you don't know what's behind those eyes. There's no idea until you people open up and they feel like they live in an environment in a society where they can say, "Hey, I'm having a hard time today." You know what I mean? Or, "Hey, I'm not actually doing that okay today." That it's okay to not be okay sometimes, like
Yep.
everything's not hunky dory all the time or every day. Like, and it's all right, and there's somebody to listen to you, and there's somebody that's here for you. You know what I mean? And maybe it's not this first person you run into or this second person, but maybe it's some random stranger that you see in the middle of the day, and they're going to sit and they're going to listen to you, and somebody's going to offer you the help you need. And if they don't, it's available somewhere. You know what I mean? I think that's the thing. A lot of people might feel like, okay, well, there's help in this space, but there's not help in that space. And it's like,
Yeah.
hey, there should be, you should be able to turn in a full 360 degrees and have help at all angles and people rooting for you to win the fight against the demon that you're battling that day.
And any demon that you have. Once again,
Anything.
addiction does not have a race, does not
Hmm.
have a gender, does not have a creed.
Hmm.
Addiction affects everyone.
Indiscriminate.
It once again is a disease just like cancer, just like whatever. It's not like, oh, only this kind of people get this, and only this kind of people. Everyone.
Hmm.
This disease does not discriminate. If the formula was that simple, that these kind of people, these kinds of things, make you have an addiction, then we would have found the formula. We would have found the cure for it.
Oh yeah.
Anyone can be an addict. Anyone around you can be an addict. Anyone can suffer from this disease. Our job as folks that don't, that isn't our plight in life because we all have something,
Hmm.
is to be supportive, to affirm them, to see them, to let them know that they're not alone. You don't need to suffer in silence, to show grace, to be forgiving, to be empowering, and also give them the tools to empower them. Because God knows the wrong thing can cause, just I can just imagine. Oh my God, I can't even imagine losing a loved one that
Oh yeah.
you've admired because of an addiction, because of something you could have said, or shoulda, coulda, woulda, and all, just a plethora of things that just boggles my mind.
Oh,
You know
absolutely.
that is true. The 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 crazy thing about it is me and my uncle, like I'm closer to him than I am my own father, because my
Okay.
father was not a part of my life like
Hmm.
fully. Like my father lived. My uncle, he actually literally asked my uncle to step in as a father figure for me. So he was that father figure for me, even though I never looked at him. Even though I was aware of his addictions, I never looked at him and judged him on those addictions. I looked at him as
Hmm.
my uncle. So even when he was going through his stuff, and I've been around him when he was high, not high, and so I was saying, this is my uncle. This is my uncle. And I never looked at him and judged him as a. I never looked at him or judged him or labeled him as an addict because I didn't see that. I just see all I see is my uncle, and I know my uncle just my uncle likes to have fun, and so he's
Mm-hmm.
when he was when as a kid when he was tired, that's my fun uncle. When he was not high, he was my fun uncle. So it was never. So we always had this close relationship, and we've had moments where we just sat. When he was sober and had the most beautiful conversations, like he would open up
Mhm.
to me and we talk about his childhood because my grandfather was a deacon in the church, but a deacon in church, but he had his own addictions. He was an alcoholic,
Oh wow.
and he was abusive to my uncle and my dad's mother. He was abusive to her. So
Mm-hmm.
when learning that, I've seen this cycle, and unfortunately, they repeated the cycle as their adult self that their father started. It trickled down to this cycle, and so me and my cousins, we made it a mission to not repeat that cycle of abuse or drugs or being addicts and like that. So we made a conscious effort to not repeat that cycle, and that's something we always have done because we want to break that cycle because we don't want to raise children and they repeat the cycle from us repeating the cycle. We have to break it somewhere, and so those conversations I had with my uncle are cherished because we are close, and I look at him as like a second father because he have his flaws. He's not perfect, but he was like a father to me. Like
Mhm.
our relationship, like I'm closer to him, and then like we have a relationship that's like more closer than his own children, which is weird because he has children, but like we have a
But
connection
it's
that's as
not
strong as his
weird
own
though.
children.
Yeah, that's not. I don't think that's weird. Sorry to interject. I don't think
Mhm.
that's weird at all though, because sometimes it just hits like that. Like sometimes you just understand each other and you connect with each other like in a way that you just don't sometimes with the other kid. Even if they're yours, but it's like you're his child anyway.
True, but
Yeah,
and it's
it's
I
still his
think
blood.
it
Yeah,
true.
absolutely.
And that is true. And I think for me it was just like because as kids, you have a parent and they connect or close to one of your siblings or relatives.
Hmm.
It inserts some jealousy or some unnecessary,
Oh
some
yeah, yeah.
So for me, I was like, didn't I would try my best not to um let that affect our relationship because I never let it affect it, but I was like always conscious of the fact that I know it's my cousins probably are kind of like a little bit jealous because me and our dad we talk, we sit outside and have conversations, and he shares stories with me of his upbringing or what he went through as a child, adult, things he
Mhm.
went through, and so I understand his story, and that's what I've always been afraid of because I don't want to lose him. And that's something that always sits with me every day. Like I don't want to get that phone call that something happened to him because my uncle just he this addiction is so serious. So seeing somebody and I'm living seeing somebody go to that and they just you never know where like sometimes he just has these he goes on these random tangents where he just get in the car and go and you may not hear from him for 2 or 3 days. So
Mhm.
it's it's just addiction stuff is scary because you just don't know.
Yeah,
You just don't know.
And
absolutely.
and again, it's scary, and the pandemic made it even scarier.
I
Yeah.
agree.
Quarantining made it even scarier.
Hmm.
Like, you could have been, whatever issues that were causing the addiction and the disease could have always been present, but there's something about this ugliness that Corona brought with it, outside of just a physical disease, that has caused a ripple effects of things psychologically, physically, and even spiritually.
I agree.
I don't, if some people who've been sober for 10 years, for decades, Corona brought them back to that dark place for
Yes.
some people.
I.
And again, this is the time to show grace,
Oh yeah.
to
It
be
And
supportive.
compassion.
Yeah,
and
and
it
compassion.
exacerbated a lot of. I think, and you hit the nail on the head there with. I was just like straight through agreeing with that because you hit the nail on the head with what happened with this pandemic. It really, I'm surprised like I didn't say this in the beginning, but it really forced you to be, and you said a version of this as well, Theo, like it forced you to be introspective and to confront some things that you didn't make time to or didn't have time to confront before.
Mm-mm.
And you were forced to go, okay, if I haven't been looking inside all along, I'm gonna learn today. Like, you know what I mean? Like you had to, because there was, you were, even if you were quarantined with family or with people, like you still were inside, I mean, for the most part. And so it, and obviously depending on your level of essential work and that kind of thing, but you still had a lot more time with just you to really hear yourself think. And I think, for some people, like you said, for some people that was good and you came out a better person for that. Some people, I feel like, they were a little bit of both. It brought some ugly things to the surface, and it also helped, it healed some things. And then in really unfortunate cases, it caused a lot of people to relapse because there weren't the resources, and because the demon became a lot bigger when it was just you and that demon, and not you and your support system and that demon. So,
Yeah.
And
so,
then locked in the room. You gotta look at that too. Like being in the house and you're in the room every
mhm,
day. In a room, you can't go anywhere. You can't do anything. You're looking at the wall,
absolutely.
four walls that you have to live in every day. Like you
Hmm.
said, and you in a room with that demon, and the demon's in your head telling you, go get that drink, go get that pipe,
Hmm.
find a way to get out of here. And then your mind is like it playing with you. So then at that point, you like you need something to help deal with this pandemic. Like you said, dealing with being quarantined. How else can someone deal with it that's dealing with addiction? And that drug helps them cope with things like this when they're stressed. Because the quarantine is stressful. Was stressful.
Oh yeah.
So
Right.
everybody deals with stress differently, and people who have addictions went to those addictions. A lot of them to cope with stress and stress of life. So
Hmm.
like you said, the quarantine itself was a stressor to the 10th power. So those people who were clean and sober for 10 years, a year, 5 years, the stress of the quarantine set them back, and they went and got that drug to help them cope with it. To cope with this last year, to cope with this 2021, to cope with this year. They've been
Hmm.
doing these drugs to help them cope with life because at this point, so much just keeps happening.
Oh
They
yeah.
can't handle it. They can't handle the real reality right now. So they need something to take them out of reality for the moment, to take them to another space in their mind for the moment. And those drugs
Mhm.
does it.
And you know what you said, Jasper, too, like the fact that all of these things, that's another like really great point. Like people that are not, that don't are not dealing with addiction, are not struggling with this disease, um like ourselves, we find it hard enough managing and mitigating and trying to figure out where all of these pieces fit from all of the things that we've experienced, in the past like year and a half, 2 years, right? So imagine trying to figure out where your emotions sit, and just it's situation after situation after world event after world event after world event, and then compound that on top of a disease that you're battling like that. That's a lot, and it's just trigger after trigger after trigger for some people too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, when am I going to get a breather? Like, I'm tired of fighting. And then that's what happens, where you relapse and you give in, because you're just like, I'm so exhausted of pushing back against this, because I don't have the support system or support team that I had before all of these things started happening back to back to back like this. It just makes it a lot harder.
Definitely a lot harder. And like you said, this is just a time for us to, people, and us to to come together and like to show compassion, show some show that you have that you have a heart, that you can be
Hmm.
the understanding and not criticize or judge, not look down, but just understand, show compassion, show some caring, because they need it right now more than
Hmm.
we need it. Those people battling those addictions definitely need that because they're dealing with things in their head that we only can imagine. That we
Hmm.
only can imagine what's going through in their mind every day, every time they wake up, they or go to sleep. They're dealing with these demons. They having these nightmares. They can't sleep, and they're up dealing with the demons in their head that's telling them
Hmm.
to go and try to do these drugs, to go and get high and go get the fix they need, and they're trying to fight and try not to give into temptation,
Hmm.
and they need support. They need love. They need, they need to be supported more now. That we dealing with this, especially dealing with this pandemic and all this we got going on in this world right now. They definitely need it even more to be embraced and uplifted and encouraged.
Absolutely.
Amen.
Amen.
I couldn't put it that even any better.
Honestly, that was great.
So
It,
we want to just let everyone know out there again, if you are experiencing a dark time, if you're
mhm.
dealing with an addiction, if you know anyone that's dealing with an addiction, this number here, Isaiah,
Yeah,
will be
absolutely.
great.
So, also, and I forgot to add earlier, you can also reach this website if internet is easier for you on www.samhsa.gov. That's www.samhsa.gov. And that's going to be the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Remember, you can call them at 1 800 662 HELP. Help is going to be 4357. That's 1 800 662 HELP, 4357. It's free, confidential, 24/7, 365-day a year treatment referral and information service. And if you or someone you know is suffering or battling with any disease, whether that be substance abuse or mental, please call that number, hop online. And if you're listening right now and you want to slide into our DM, honestly, because you need to talk, please accept that invitation to do that as well. Because I think, sometimes it starts in one small space to try and help build a better community with communication, and to be able to help everybody feel comfortable to talk about the things they're going through within society.
And RIP to Michael K. Williams, who lost his battle this week with this disease.
Absolutely.
RIP to those who've lost the battle to this disease. And for those who are still battling the disease, much love, much support. Keep pushing, keep fighting.
Yes, keep fighting. Stay
Yeah.
strong.
Stay
You
strong.
got it. The
Until next
battle's not
time.
over.
Until next time, everybody.
Night, everyone.